So one kind of moment of inspiration that I track back a lot of my artistic practice to. Sorry, do I talk to you or do I talk here? Tara? Okay. So in terms of inspiration, like the place where a lot of it comes from for me was from this one really empowering moment I had as a student back in the late 90s where I was studying architecture and I had one class about computers. And the teacher introduced us to what HTML was and what an FTP window was. And I have like really vivid memories of him dragging a file like from the computer desktop into this sort of magical FTP window, and that would update this web page. And it was the first time I kind of understood how the internet was structured and how it worked, and kind of immediately understood how powerful that could be. And so a lot of what I'm making now is trying to get back to that kind of feeling of like having more power than maybe you should have in terms of using technology to communicate to a group of people. I think what inspires me is, like those moments I had when I first saw the internet, is these kind of small moments when you're put in a position of empowerment, where you're experiencing something that maybe you didn't have as much voice, whether that's speaking within the city, whether that's communicating with a group of people online. It's like those technologies or those pieces of art that give those to people, that give them a platform where they can have more agency in the world. Those are the ones to me that are the most inspiring. I think for me, one big change that's happened, and it's happened kind of slowly, but because the internet was such a big sort of origin for me in terms of entering to the arts and having something I wanted to make art about, in terms of how culture was connected through the web in this new way, I think the internet is kind of really fundamentally changed at some point. I don't know when exactly that was, but between how it's been monetized and how it's getting centralized onto fewer and fewer and fewer servers, and then also like what happened with the whole NSA spying scandal, there was like this sort of, for me, this like confluence of terrible things that happened to the internet that make it a less, I'm less sort of naively optimistic about what the internet could be, and that's been playing into my art practice a bit now. It doesn't mean I'm not interested in still making works about the effect of the network culture on society, but I think the kind of possibilities I had for the internet being this egalitarian thing that was going to be this amazing vehicle for free speech is not there for me anymore. The piece is called Level Cleared. I guess what I hope the strength of the piece is, you can be the judge of whether it's there or not, is I think this piece is maybe a good example of some of the other work I'm making now that's interested in thinking about two different timelines. Like there's one timeline of the way art is digested now, which is like Instagram, Tumblr, 3 seconds, you kind of react to something immediately. And then there's another way of viewing art, which is why we're here, which is when you want to come and have somewhat of a more meditative experience where you're going to invest more time into that work. And so I hope that this piece works on those kind of two time scales where you can see it quickly on the internet and there's this pop culture connection to this video game that a lot of people have, and there's a sort of, maybe a sort of funny comical reference point there for some people. And then my hope is that if you sit with it longer, the piece opens up in different ways, which is like when I stand in front of the piece, I think about all the things that I haven't done in my life that I wish I would have done, you know? Like I live in France and I don't speak French. Like I still need to go jogging more often. I still need to cook better food. And instead of doing that, I've beaten Angry Birds like 3 times now. And so there's meant to be embedded into the piece this like darker level that maybe hides under the surface of something more humorous. I remember like when I was going to elementary school at the bus stop, and like the big kids at the bus stop had on a pair of headphones that they were passing around, and they were playing NWA's Straight Outta Compton. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's like one of the main gangster rap albums. And I remember hearing that album for the first time, and I couldn't even believe it was like allowed to happen. You know, I was growing up in the middle of Michigan, like out in the middle of nowhere, and all of a sudden was this like this voice and these voices saying things that I've never heard anybody say, and it was like a really empowering, interesting, artistic experience for me, and it's one that I've kind of held with me. Like when you're confronted with something like a piece of like art or music or anything sort of creative, and it has that ability to sort of really stop you in your tracks. Like I haven't had that many experiences like that since, maybe. I mean, based on the last question, I think it probably has some sort of indirect influence, but I listen to a lot of hip hop, but I listen to a lot of different music. But I think like rap music has a sort of interesting sort of empowerment nature embedded into the music too. Like a lot of the art that I'm making deals with the notion of misuse and how you can misuse different pieces of technology or different materials and they can have these empowering effects on either the artist or the viewer. And I think hip hop music has that as part of its like history, right? Like from the very beginning, hip hop was misusing record players, or maybe more conceptually was misusing music in general. Like the whole idea of the sample was like really big. Like I remember as a kid when I couldn't understand what sampling was. I couldn't understand like, what does this mean that we don't have to make music anymore? We can just take bits and pieces of it. And I think that has definitely like influenced my work indirectly, at least. Favorite is a hard word for me with video games because I tend to have like an addictive personality with video games. Like I'll start playing them more than I should. That's kind of where the impetus for this piece came. Like I was literally playing Angry Birds more than I was comfortable with, and I had to do something about it. So favorite is like a difficult word. The one that I play the most is probably Skate 2, which is like a skateboarding video game on the iPhone. But then again, it's like, it's all wrapped up in this sort of, this whole idea of like casual computing and this kind of fun that we have on our phones. It's like also kind of crippling, right? Like to me, it's depressing that this video game that I've played on the train over here and I played on the flight yesterday, like I play that video game all the time and I never go actually skateboarding anymore. So I don't know if favorite is the right word, but Skate 2 is the game that I play the most now. I mean, even though like technology is kind of, issues surrounding technology and culture surround a lot of my work also, it doesn't come from the standpoint of me liking them necessarily. Like if anything, it comes from the opposite. Like, so the idea of going without my phone or my computer for a week isn't scary at all. Like it actually sounds kind of appealing in a sense. And this piece is like testament to that. Like this piece is a lot about me wrestling with wishing I could be away from my phone a bit more often, away from email a bit more often. And so I don't have this kind of, I'm not looking to spend more time with my technology. If anything, it's, yeah, the other way. So this piece is called Level Cleared. And it's kind of wrestling with the idea of casual computing and how in the sort of, as we've sort of grown with technology, like for me there was this big moment when we started carrying the computer with us all the time, right? And how now it's with us everywhere we go all the time, and how this was maybe a more fundamental change with our relationship with technology and our relationship with culture than it was from, say, the computer to the laptop. Like this is now the fact that it's with us all the time, and it's always kind of asking for our attention in different ways. And so specifically how the piece is constructed is these are all just pieces of tracing paper that are the same size as my computer that never leaves me. And I went into my studio for 4 days and would play the game Angry Birds. So if you're familiar with Angry Birds, you know it well probably. If you're not, it's maybe the most popular example of a mobile gaming application that has become massively popular over the years. But it could have been any game, really. Like the piece is more about time than it is about any specific game. And I would just put the paper over the phone and put ink on my finger, and I would play it from start to finish. And so it starts with level 1 in the upper left-hand corner and goes all the way down to the very end of the game in the bottom right. And so, yeah, I was talking a bit about this in the previous question, but it really, for me, it's a lot about time. It's about that immediate moment in time and how these gestures, these movements that we're doing now aren't movements that humans had any reason to be doing up until the last few years, you know, whether it's slide to unlock or pinch to zoom. Like these are sort of new movements that we're all doing all the time now, which didn't used to be the case even 20 years ago. And so some of this is about recording those like instantaneous gestures. And even we're thinking about how the piece is viewed, there's something in the immediacy that may be interesting in that and seeing what these gestures look like. But then I'm also interested in what it might look like 50 or 100 years from now when people are thinking back to what it was like when like humans were first introduced to having these computers with us all the time, and what did it look like and feel like when we first started touching pixels like that. And so these things that feel kind of contemporary at the moment now, I think in hindsight are going to feel like really clumsy. Like this is a kind of, to me, a very awkward, clumsy way to sort of consume and make elements of culture. And so the time works also in like a more personal way too, where
I really had a relationship with my phone and with these games where I would find myself wasting time all the time, you know. And you see it all the time. You see it on airplanes. You see it when you're socializing with friends at dinner, and there's always this impulse to pull our phones out. And I think it's like, it's part of like us growing up and learning and going through this awkward moment with technology where we're learning what these social implications are of never having the computer leave us. And so for me, this is like, I like it when people come to the piece and maybe they do have a moment when they realize it's this game they have a connection with and it might be funny, and I like it when people come up and laugh. I also like it when people sit with it for a bit longer and the piece maybe feels a bit more crushing, which is how it feels to me. Like when I stand underneath it and I see all this and like think about the things that I could have been doing other than throwing birds at pigs on my phone, that's meant to be kind of a part of the piece as well. And so I kind of hope it works on those different levels in terms of how it's made in terms of time and also how it's viewed in terms of time.